The sun was setting over the red desert of New Mexico in 1878, painting the sky in shades of gold and fire. A lonely rider moved slowly along the trail. His name was Cole Matthews, a tall, quiet cowboy with eyes that carried the weight of too many memories. He had fought in a war, lost his land, and buried his past beneath miles of dust. All he had left was his horse, his saddle, and a promise to live one more day. Cole wasn't a man of many words. He believed that the desert listened better than people did. It never interrupted, never judged. The wind was his companion and the stars were his map. Each night he slept near a small campfire and wondered if there was still a place in this world for a man like him. A man who didn't fit on either side of the fence. One late afternoon, as he followed the Rio Grande's edge, his horse snorted and stopped. Cole squinted ahead. Something dark lay near the rocks by the riverbank. At first he thought it was a fallen deer or maybe a lost blanket, but as he rode closer he saw a small hand twitch. It was a woman, wounded, half-conscious, and alone. She was young, her skin touched by the sun, her long dark hair tangled with sand and blood. Her dress was torn and one side of her arm was wrapped in makeshift cloth. Cole jumped down from his horse and knelt beside her. Her breath was shallow, but she was alive. He called softly, "Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman opened her eyes slowly, dark, strong eyes, the color of storm clouds. She looked at him with fear at first, then confusion. He could tell right away she was Apache. For a moment, both froze. A cowboy and an Apache woman, strangers born from two worlds that never trusted each other. Cole could have walked away. He had no reason to stay. The frontier was full of old anger between settlers and tribes, and helping her could mean danger from both sides. But something deep in his chest told him otherwise. He tore a piece of cloth from his shirt and cleaned the dried blood on her arm. "You're hurt," he said quietly. "Let me help." She didn't speak, only watched him carefully. He poured a little water from his canteen into her mouth. The woman coughed, tried to sit, but winced from pain. Cole gently helped her up and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. His voice stayed calm, almost like he was talking to a frightened animal. "I'm not gonna harm you, just need to get you warm." He lifted her onto his horse, mounted behind her, and rode toward a small canyon he knew. A hidden place where the wind couldn't steal the fire. The journey was slow. The woman leaned weakly against his chest, her head resting just below his shoulder. Cole felt her trembling. He looked up at the endless sky and whispered to himself, "Hold on, lady. We'll get through this." By nightfall, they reached a narrow cave surrounded by tall stones. Cole made a small fire and laid her down gently. He checked the wound on her arm. A deep cut, not fresh, maybe from a knife or a sharp rock. He cleaned it with warm water and herbs from his saddlebag. The woman flinched but didn't pull away. As the flames flickered, Cole noticed the quiet beauty in her face. Not the kind that came from softness, but from strength. She looked like someone who had survived many storms and still stood tall. He respected that. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, in a soft and tired voice, she whispered, "Nita." Cole looked up. "Nita, that your name?" She nodded slowly. "You?" "Cole," he said simply, adding another stick to the fire. That was all they said that night. But sometimes, silence speaks louder than words. The next morning, Cole cooked a little dried meat and gave her water. Nita ate carefully, her eyes watching him the whole time. She seemed unsure whether to trust him. Later, when she tried to move her injured arm, she winced and bit her lip. Cole stood and said gently, "You need to rest. Riding too soon could open the wound again." Nita frowned, clearly not used to being told what to do. But there was no anger in her eyes and only pride. She looked around and said in broken English, "My sister. Taken bad men." Cole paused, realizing now what had happened. She hadn't been wounded by accident. Someone had attacked her and then taken her sister. He crouched near her and spoke softly. "You're saying some men took your sister?" She nodded, her hands tightening into fists. "They hurt her. I follow, they find me. I fall." Her words were short, but the meaning was clear. Cole felt a spark of anger inside him. Not the kind that burns for revenge, but the kind that rises when someone innocent suffers. He had seen enough wrong in his life to recognize injustice when it stood before him. "You know where they went?" he asked. Nita pointed west toward the dry mountains. There, Cole looked at the horizon. That trail led to outlaw country. Rough land filled with men who lived by no rules. He had been through that region before, and it wasn't safe for anyone, let alone a wounded woman. He looked back at her, sitting weakly by the fire. "You can't ride like this," he said firmly. "But I can go find her." Nita shook her head sharply. "No, my blood, my sister. I go." Cole respected her courage, but he knew she was too weak. Still, he saw the fire in her eyes. The same fire that once made him fight for what was right, even when it cost him everything. "All right," he said finally. "Then we go together." That night, he helped her build strength by wrapping her arm with tighter bandages. They shared stories in bits and pieces. Cole told her about the ranch he once had in Texas, about losing his brother in the war, about wandering ever since. Nita told him about her people, how they followed the rivers, how they sang to the wind before battle, and how her tribe believed every kind act added light to a person's spirit. Cole listened quietly. He had never heard anyone speak about goodness that way before. When dawn came, the desert glowed pink and orange. Cole saddled his horse, helped Nita climb up, and they started their journey west. The land stretched endlessly. Open plains, dry shrubs, faraway hills shaped like sleeping giants. Sometimes they rode in silence. Other times, Cole pointed out animal tracks or old trails. He noticed Nita studying the sky, reading the clouds like a map. Her knowledge of the land amazed him. She could tell direction by how the wind smelled or how shadows fell on rocks. By the third day, Nita grew stronger. Her spirit seemed unbreakable. At night, Cole often caught her humming soft songs in her language, gentle and haunting like prayers carried on the breeze. One evening, they camped near a small stream. The stars were brighter than ever, thousands of tiny fires burning above them. Cole watched them reflect in the water and said quietly, "Funny thing, you save someone, and somehow it feels like you're the one being saved." Nita looked at him, puzzled. "You lost something?" He smiled sadly. "Yeah, long time ago. Guess I've been riding to find it ever since." She didn't ask what it was. She only said, "Maybe you find it now." For the first time in years, Cole felt peace. The desert no longer felt empty. The wind carried voices again, not of ghosts or regret, but of something alive, something good. He didn't know that in a few short days, his kindness would be tested harder than ever before. The promise he had made to help Nita find her sister would lead him straight into danger, and before it was over, his courage would be written into legend. But that night under the stars, he was just a man who had chosen to do the right thing, and that choice was already changing both their lives. The next morning began with a pale light spreading across the desert. The wind carried the scent of mesquite and dust. Cole woke first, as always. He stirred the ashes of the small campfire and poured a bit of water into a tin cup. The sun wasn't up yet, but the sky had started to glow, soft pink fading into blue. He looked at Nita, who was still asleep beside the fire, wrapped in his old blanket. She looked peaceful now, though her face still showed traces of exhaustion. Cole couldn't help but admire her strength. Even wounded, she had a quiet dignity like the desert itself, harsh yet beautiful. When she opened her eyes, she found him sitting nearby, sharpening a small knife. "Morning," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She nodded slightly and reached for her water pouch. "We go now?" "Soon," he said. "But you eat first." He handed her a small piece of dried bread and some beans he had cooked earlier. She ate in silence, her eyes scanning the horizon. Cole noticed how alert she was. Every sound, every movement caught her attention. She wasn't just cautious, she was prepared for danger. "You think they're close?" he asked. Nita nodded. "They go to Old Mine near Black Mesa. I saw their marks." Cole remembered the place. It was an abandoned silver mine, half collapsed, sitting deep in the canyons. He had passed by once years ago, when it was still worked by a few settlers. Now it was empty, or so most people thought. "If that's where they're holding your sister," he said, "we'll need to be careful. There's only one trail in and one way out." Nita looked at him firmly. "We find her." "I'm not afraid," Cole smiled faintly. "Didn't think you were." By midday, the two were riding through the canyon. The rocks rose high on both sides, shaped by centuries of wind and rain. The path was narrow and the sun beat down on them like fire. Cole could feel his shirt sticking to his back, but he didn't complain. He was too focused on what lay ahead. Every few minutes, Nita would stop, dismount, and kneel to the ground. She studied the sand like it was a book, looking for tracks, broken twigs, or signs of movement. Her eyes were sharp. "2 horses," she said once. 3 days ago. 1 wagon. They carry something heavy. "Could be your sister," Cole said quietly. Nita nodded, but her jaw tightened. Cole saw pain in her eyes, not from her wound, but from worry. He wished there was something he could say to comfort her. But he knew words weren't enough, so he did what he always did. He stayed close, steady as the horse beneath him. As the afternoon sun began to fade, they reached a ridge overlooking the valley. Cole stopped his horse and raised his hand. "Look down there," he whispered. Below them, the land opened into a flat basin surrounded by rocks. At the far end stood the entrance to the old mine, a black hole in the earth with a few wooden beams still holding it up. Smoke rose faintly from a small camp near the entrance. Cole and Nita watched quietly. They saw 3 horses tied to a post and 2 figures moving near the fire. "Looks like 2 men," Cole said softly. "Could be more inside." Nita's eyes filled with tears. "My sister is there." "I feel it," Cole thought for a moment. He needed a plan. He couldn't just walk in. "We wait until dark," he said. "When the fire burns low, we'll move closer." They stayed hidden behind rocks as the sun dipped below the horizon. The desert cooled quickly and shadows grew long. The orange glow from the campfire below flickered like a heartbeat. Cole checked his revolver, then hesitated.
He hated using it.
It reminded him of the war, of people lost and promises broken. As night settled, he and Nita slowly climbed down the rocky slope, 1 step at a time. The wind covered their movements, whispering softly through the canyon. When they reached the bottom, they could hear faint voices. Cole motioned for Nita to stay low. He crept forward, his hand brushing the ground for balance. From behind a rock, he saw a man sitting by the fire, sharpening a blade while another man was carrying a wooden bucket toward the mine. Then came the sound that froze both of them, a woman's weak voice calling from inside the mine. Cole looked at Nita. She didn't need to speak. "That was her sister," Cole whispered. "Stay here. I'll go check." But Nita shook her head fiercely. "No, we go together." He sighed, knowing he couldn't stop her. She was too determined. Together, they waited for the right moment. When one man walked out of sight and the other was dozing near the fire. They moved like shadows, quiet and careful. Cole reached the side of the mine first. The air coming from inside was cool and smelled of dust. He stepped softly into the entrance and saw a small lantern burning near the wall. In the dim light, he spotted a young woman lying on the ground, her hands tied but her eyes open. Nita gasped quietly. "Aline." Her sister turned her head slowly. When she saw Nita, tears filled her eyes. "You came," she whispered. Nita knelt and untied her hands. Cole helped her stand. "We have to go," he said. But just as they stepped toward the entrance, a sound broke the silence and footsteps behind them. Someone had returned. Nita froze. Cole looked toward the opening, then at the sisters. He whispered quickly, "Stay here. Don't move." He stepped out and saw a man standing by the fire looking suspiciously toward the mine. Cole tried to distract him by stepping out from the shadows. "Evening," he said calmly. "Didn't mean to startle you." The man turned sharply, surprised to see him. "Who are you?" he demanded. Cole didn't answer right away. He took a slow breath. "Just someone looking for what's right." The man stared, unsure what to make of him. Cole could see Nita and Aline creeping out behind him, moving toward the horses. For a moment it seemed like they might make it. Then the man shouted and chaos followed. The horses neighed, the fire flared, and everything happened fast. Cole grabbed one of the horses and swung himself up. He pulled Nita and Aline behind him. The horse bolted through the canyon as the campfire faded into the distance. They rode hard until the moon was high, and the valley far behind them. The sisters held on tightly, their faces pale but alive. Cole's heart pounded from the chase, but inside he felt relief. They were safe. For now. When they finally stopped near a cluster of rocks, Cole slid off his horse and helped them down. Aline was weak but breathing steadily. Nita hugged her tightly, whispering words in Apache that Cole couldn't understand but could feel in his heart. He leaned against a rock, catching his breath. The desert was quiet again, only the soft rustle of the wind passing by. "You found her," he said, smiling faintly. Nita turned to him. "We found her," she corrected. "You help us." Cole nodded, looking up at the stars. "Guess I did." The night stretched on, peaceful and cool. The 3 of them sat near a small fire, sharing silence and gratitude. Aline rested her head on her sister's shoulder. Nita looked at Cole, her eyes shining softly in the firelight. "Why you help me?" she asked. He thought for a moment before answering. "Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it. I figure it's my turn." Nita didn't say anything after that. She only smiled. A quiet, grateful smile that said more than words ever could. Cole watched the two sisters, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for that night, under the blanket of stars, he was exactly where he was meant to be. He didn't know yet that the hardest part of his journey was still waiting. The danger wasn't over, and before the next sunrise, he would be forced to choose between his safety and their lives. But for now, the fire burned softly, and the desert sang its gentle song, carrying hope across the endless sands. The first light of dawn brushed across the desert, turning the red rocks golden. The air was cool and quiet. Cole sat near the ashes of the dying fire, his hat tilted low and his hand resting on his knee. He hadn't slept much. The events of the night kept replaying in his mind. The chase through the canyon, the fear in Nita's eyes, and the relief when her sister Aline was finally free. Nita and Aline slept a few feet away, wrapped in blankets. For the first time in days, their faces were calm. Cole smiled faintly. There was something peaceful about seeing them safe. He didn't know these women before, but somehow, they had become a part of his story, and he of theirs. The morning sun rose slowly, and Cole began to pack the saddle. He planned to take them to safer ground, far from the old mine, but deep down he knew something wasn't right. The desert was too still, too silent. Even the birds seemed to be hiding. When Nita woke, she stretched weakly and asked, "We go?" Cole nodded. "Yeah, we'll head north. There's a spring a few miles from here. You and your sister can rest there." Aline smiled shyly, her voice soft.
"Thank you," she said in broken English.
Cole tipped his hat with a small grin. "Don't mention it." By mid-morning, they were riding through a dry wash between two cliffs. The wind had picked up, carrying a low whistling sound that echoed between the rocks. Cole rode first, scanning the trail ahead. Nita and Aline followed behind him on his horse. The desert stretched endlessly with no sign of life. Then, faintly, Cole heard something, a sound that didn't belong to the wind. Hoofbeats. He turned his head slightly, listening. Yes, horses, more than one. His heart tightened. Someone was following them. He spoke quietly but firmly. "Keep riding. Stay close behind me." Nita's eyes widened. "Who?" "Don't know," he said. "But we're not stopping to find out." The three urged their horse forward, but the sound of hoofbeats grew louder. Whoever it was, they were closing in fast. The canyon walls ahead narrowed, leaving little room to move. Cole's mind raced. He couldn't risk leading Nita and Aline into a trap. "Up there," he said, pointing to a ridge of rocks. "We'll hide." They guided the horse off the trail and climbed the slope, dismounting behind a line of boulders. The sisters crouched low, breathing hard. Cole knelt beside them, peering down at the trail below. A cloud of dust appeared in the distance. Soon he saw three riders. They weren't Apache. Their clothes looked rough, worn, and familiar. He recognized one of them, the man who had shouted at the camp last night. Cole sighed quietly. "They followed us," he whispered. Nita looked alarmed. "They come back?" "Looks that way." Aline clutched her sister's arm. "What we do?" Cole looked around quickly. The rocks offered some cover, but not much. He couldn't take both sisters and run. They wouldn't be fast enough on foot. The only way was to stand their ground. He turned to them calmly. "You two stay here. No matter what happens, you don't move. Understand?" Nita shook her head. "No, we stay together." Cole smiled gently, though his eyes were serious. "You've already done your part. Let me do mine." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Cole stood up, adjusted his hat, and walked out from behind the rocks. He could see the three riders approaching fast. The desert sun shimmered behind them like a curtain of fire. He raised his hand, trying to signal them to stop. "You don't want to do this," he called out calmly. The riders slowed but didn't dismount. The man in front, the one with the long coat, stared down at him. "You again," he said, his voice sharp. "Should have minded your own business." Cole's voice stayed steady. The woman was hurt. "I just helped," the man sneered. "You helped yourself to trouble, cowboy." Cole didn't answer. He stood firm, his boots sinking slightly in the dust. The riders looked at each other, clearly angry but uncertain. Something about Cole's calm made them hesitate. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the whisper of the wind. Then slowly Cole spoke again. "You've got a choice. Turn around and leave this place. Nobody has to get hurt." For a moment, no one moved. The desert held its breath. Then the man in the long coat dismounted and walked a few steps forward. "You think you can tell us what to do?" he said coldly. Cole didn't flinch. "I think it's the smart thing to do." The man glared at him, then looked past him, toward the rocks where Nita and Aline were hiding. "You're protecting them, huh?" "Why?" Cole's voice softened. "Because someone should." The man stared at him for a long second, then gave a cold laugh. "You're a fool." "Maybe," Cole said quietly. "But I sleep better that way." The desert went still again. And then, everything happened in a blur. The riders dismounted, muttering angrily. Cole took a deep breath. His heart was pounding, but his mind was calm. He wasn't thinking about himself, only about keeping the sisters safe. He took a step back, keeping their attention on him and away from the rocks. The air felt heavy, like the moment before a storm. The man in the long coat moved closer, his eyes narrowing. "You're not leaving this place," he said. Cole's hand stayed loose by his side. "We'll see about that." The wind kicked up, swirling sand around them. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. Then the sound of a horse neighing broke the stillness. Nita and Aline peeked from behind the rocks, fear written on their faces. Cole turned his head slightly toward them, just enough to know they were still safe. And that's when it happened. The world blurred, sound faded, and everything turned to motion. When the dust settled, Cole was lying on the ground. The desert sky above him was wide and endless, and he could feel his breath slipping away. He looked down and saw his shirt torn, his chest aching. He couldn't move, but his mind was clear. Nita ran toward him, her sister close behind. "Cole!" she cried, her voice breaking. She knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. No, you stay." He smiled faintly, his hand trembling as he reached up. "You two okay?" he whispered. Aline nodded through tears. "We safe. You saved us." Cole tried to speak again, but his strength was fading. The world around him began to fade into light. He could hear Nita's voice, soft and broken, calling his name in her language, ancient words that sounded like prayers. He wanted to tell her it was all right, that he didn't regret a thing. But his lips wouldn't move. The last thing he saw was her face, and brave and full of sorrow, and before everything went dark. The desert grew quiet once more. Only the wind moved, brushing over the sand as if trying to carry his story away. Hours passed. The sun dipped low, and the sisters refused to leave his side. They called for help, their voices echoing across the canyon until the sound of hoofbeats returned, not from enemies, but from their own people. 3 Apache riders appeared at dusk, one of them an elder woman dressed in traditional robes. She saw Cole lying still and the sisters crying beside him. She dismounted, knelt beside him, and placed her hands gently over his heart. "The spirits are not done with him," she said softly. "He gave his life for love of goodness. Such hearts do not fade so easily." The women carried Cole back to their hidden camp deep in the red cliffs. For 2 nights they worked tirelessly to save him. Herbs were boiled, chants whispered under the moonlight. Nita never left his side. She held his hand and spoke to him as though he could still hear. "Come back," she whispered. "You are not done. You must see the morning again." And somewhere deep in the quiet of his mind, Cole heard her voice, a voice pulling him back from the edge of silence. A cool wind brushed over the desert, carrying the scent of sage and smoke. The night sky stretched wide and endless above the Apache camp. The fire crackled softly, its glow flickering across the faces of those who kept watch. In the center of the small circle lay Cole Matthews, still pale and silent. 3 Apache women sat beside him. One was Nita, the woman he had saved. The second was her younger sister Aline, who clung to her hand and whispered quiet prayers. The third was Nadine, the elder healer of their tribe, a woman known for her wisdom and power. Her long gray hair flowed like silver in the firelight, and her eyes carried the calm of one who had seen both life and death many times. For 2 days and 2 nights, they had done everything they could to save the cowboy's life. They crushed herbs, mixed powders, and pressed warm cloths over his chest. His breath was weak but still there, faint like a candle's last flame. Nita had not slept. Her hands were always on his, sometimes to warm them, sometimes to feel that faint beat beneath his wrist. She had never met anyone like him before, a man from another world who had no reason to risk his life for hers, and yet he had done so without hesitation. She didn't understand why, but she knew she could never forget it. As the third night fell, Nadine sat quietly by the fire. The flames danced in her eyes as she hummed a low ancient song. It was a prayer to the spirits of the earth, a song meant to call wandering souls back to their bodies. Nida listened, tears shining in her eyes. "Will he live?" she asked in a trembling voice. Nadine looked at her calmly. "That is not for us to decide. The spirits have tested his heart. If his purpose is not finished, they will guide him back." Nida bowed her head. "He is good. He saved me. He saved my sister. His heart is strong." The elder nodded slowly. "Then speak to him. The soul follows the voice it trusts most." Nida leaned close to Cole, her hand gently touching his cheek. "Cole," she whispered, "you must wake up. The desert is waiting for you. You still have miles to ride." For a long moment there was only silence. The fire popped softly. Then, just barely, Cole's fingers moved. Aline gasped, her small hands flying to her mouth. "He moves!" Nadine's eyes flashed with relief, but she kept her calm. "Do not stop. Keep speaking. His spirit is near." Nida held his hand tighter. "You cannot leave. You said you would help. You said we would go north to the spring." Her words were quiet, but her heart poured into them. Then Cole's eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully, he opened his eyes. The world around him came into view like the first light of dawn. The ceiling above him was made of hides and wood. The smell of herbs filled the air. For a moment he didn't remember where he was. Then his vision cleared and he saw 3 faces looking down at him: Nida, Aline, and Nadine. For a second he thought he was dreaming. The light behind them looked like a halo of fire. "Am I—" he started, his voice weak and dry. "Am I still here?" Nida let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "Yes, you live." Aline smiled wide, tears shining in her eyes. "You wake up, Cowboy." Cole blinked, trying to speak. "What happened?" Nida touched his shoulder gently. "You protect us, you fall. But the spirits send you back." He tried to sit, but Nadine raised her hand calmly. "Rest, your body still heals. You crossed the edge of life, but your heart refused to let go." Cole looked at her. The elder's face was strong, lined with wisdom and time. She held a small pouch in her hands, filled with herbs and dust. "You saved me," he whispered. Nadine shook her head slowly. "We only guided your body. The land and the spirit saved your soul." Cole closed his eyes, taking a shaky breath. "I don't understand." "You will," she said simply. For the next few days, Cole stayed in the Apache camp. They gave him broth, water, and medicine made from the roots of desert plants. His body was weak, but his mind was sharp. Every time he opened his eyes, he saw Nida sitting nearby. She would grind herbs, feed her sister, and care for him without complaint. Sometimes, when the others slept, she told him stories about her people, about the river spirits who guarded the night, about the desert stars that listened to the songs of the brave. Cole listened quietly, fascinated. "Your world," he said one night, "it's full of meaning. Every rock, every breeze, and it all matters to you." Nida smiled softly. "The earth gives life. We do not own it. We care for it like family." He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what my people forgot." As days passed, he grew stronger. He could walk again, though he still felt pain when he moved too fast. The tribe respected him now. They had seen what he did for Nida. Children followed him curiously when he stepped outside the hut. Women brought him food. Men nodded quietly in approval. One morning, Nadine came to see him. The sunlight spilled into the hut, touching the floor with gold. "You are healing well," she said. Cole smiled. "Thanks to you." She sat down beside him. "Do you know why the spirits returned you?" He shook his head slowly. "I reckon I don't." Nadine looked at him with calm eyes. "They saw your courage. You had no reason to help our people, but you did. In our way, that makes you family. The spirits gave you a new name, Shash Nantan, which means bear leader. The bear protects. He gives strength not for himself, but for others. That is who you are." Cole looked down, humbled. "Never been much for names," he said softly. "But I'll try to live up to that one." The elder smiled gently. "You already have." That evening, the tribe gathered to celebrate his recovery. A great fire burned in the center of the camp. Men played drums made from hide, and women sang songs that echoed into the night. The children danced, their shadows leaping across the sand. Cole sat near the fire, watching the faces glow with warmth and laughter. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere. The loneliness that had followed him through the desert had finally lifted. Nita sat beside him, dressed in a traditional shawl. Her eyes sparkled in the firelight. "You look better," she said softly. He smiled. "Guess I had good doctors." She laughed quietly. "Nadine say you strong like mountain. She say spirits watch you now." Cole looked into the flames. "Maybe they've been watching me a long time. I just never noticed." For a long while they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the beat of the drums and the crackle of the fire. Later that night, when most of the tribe had gone to sleep, Cole stood at the edge of the camp. The desert stretched before him, glowing under the moonlight. The stars above looked close enough to touch. Nita joined him quietly. "You think of leaving?" she asked. He took a deep breath. "I've been running all my life. Never had a reason to stop. Maybe now I do." She looked up at him, her dark hair moving gently in the wind. "You stay, you learn our ways. Or you go but carry our spirit with you. Both are good paths." He looked at her, his voice calm and honest. "If I stay, would I be welcome?" She smiled, her eyes soft. "You already are." Cole turned his gaze to the horizon. Somewhere out there was the old life he had left behind, full of war, dust, and loneliness. But here, in this quiet place of song and starlight, he had found peace. Behind him, the fire still burned. Nadine stood at its edge, watching them. Her lips moved in a quiet prayer. "The bear walks with the tribe," she whispered, "and the spirits walk with him." Cole didn't hear her words, but he felt them in his heart. As the night deepened, the three women, Nita, Aline, and Nadine, stood together near the fire, their faces glowing softly in the light. They were not just his healers. They were his guardians, the reason he still breathed. And as Cole looked at them, he realized something that would stay with him forever. Sometimes, the strongest warriors are not the ones who fight, but the ones who heal, forgive, and protect. Weeks passed after Cole's awakening, and the Apache camp settled back into quiet life. The desert slowly turned greener after a short rain, with wildflowers blooming between the rocks. Every sunrise brought a sense of peace that Cole had never known before. He often helped the tribe with small tasks, fixing fences, carrying water from the stream, repairing saddles, and teaching some of the young men how to mend leather or tie rope the way cowboys did. The children liked him too. They followed him around, laughing whenever his hat slipped or when he pretended to forget which way was north. Though Cole was still healing, his spirit was stronger than ever. He had once believed that the desert only took things away from people, their homes, their dreams, their strength. But now he understood something deeper. The desert didn't take, it tested. It stripped away everything unimportant, leaving only what was true. And in that truth, Cole had found a home. Nita spent most days near him, helping the women prepare food or gather herbs. Their friendship had grown naturally, as like water finding its way through stone. She didn't speak much, but when she smiled, it carried warmth that made even the hardest days gentle. One evening, Cole sat by the fire, watching the sun dip behind the cliffs. The colors of the sky were deep orange and purple, like the world was painted in fire. Nita joined him, handing him a bowl of stew. "You eat," she said softly. "Thank you," he replied with a nod. They ate in silence for a while. Then Nita said, "You heal fast now. Soon you ride again." Cole looked at her, thoughtful. "Maybe, but I don't know where I'd go. You have no home?" He looked into the fire. "Not anymore. Used to have a ranch. Used to have a family. War took one, time took the other." Nita's eyes softened. "You find new family here?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe I already did." The fire crackled between them, and for a moment neither spoke. Above, the first stars began to appear. Later that night, Nadine, the elder, came to sit beside them. Her steps were slow but steady, and her eyes reflected the flames. "The tribe will move north soon," she said. "Before winter," Cole nodded. "I can help with the wagons." She shook her head. "You have already helped enough, Shashnantan. The spirits tell me your path may not end here." Cole looked confused. "You think I should leave?" Nadine smiled gently. "Not all who leave are lost. Some carry our light into places that have forgotten it. You are one of them. The land beyond the mountains still needs men with hearts like yours." Cole fell silent. He didn't want to leave, yet he understood her words. Life wasn't about holding on. It was about carrying the lessons forward. That night he couldn't sleep. He walked out into the desert, letting the cold wind touch his face. The moon was bright, lighting the sand like silver. He thought of everything that had happened. The ride, the rescue, the fight, and the faces of the 3 women who had saved him when he had nothing left. He knelt on the ground, his hat pressed to his chest. "If you're listening," he whispered into the night, "thank you for giving me another chance, for showing me there's still good in this world." Behind him, soft footsteps approached. It was Nita. She stopped beside him, looking at the stars. "You speak to the spirits?" she asked gently. "Yeah," he said quietly, trying to tell him I'm grateful. "They hear you," she said with certainty. "They always do." He turned to her. "If I ride away, will you be all right?" She nodded slowly. "We always survive. But our hearts remember." Cole looked at her face, lit by the moonlight and strong, kind, and full of calm wisdom. He didn't say goodbye because some goodbyes are too heavy for words. Instead, he simply said, "Thank you for teaching me how to live again." The next morning, before the tribe woke, Cole saddled his horse. Nita and Aline stood nearby, watching silently. Nadine walked forward and placed a small beaded necklace in his hand. "Take this," she said. "When you wear it, the spirits of the 3 women who saved you walk beside you, one who prayed for you, one who healed you, and one who guided your soul." Cole looked down at the necklace. Small, simple, with 3 tiny shells. "I'll keep it close," he promised. Nita stepped forward. "The wind will carry your name," she said softly. "Wherever you go, our hearts go with you." Cole nodded, his throat tight. "You take care of each other now." He mounted his horse and looked back once more. The morning sun was rising behind the camp, lighting up the cliffs. 3 figures stood together, Nita, Aline, and Nadine, their shawls moving gently in the wind. That image would never leave his memory. He rode away slowly, the desert stretching ahead like an endless sea of gold. The necklace around his neck felt warm against his chest. Every time the wind blew, it seemed to whisper softly, as if the spirits truly were riding with him. Days turned into weeks. Cole crossed mountains, rivers, and towns. People he met along the way often noticed something different about him. A calmness, a quiet strength. When they asked where he came from, he would only smile and say, "The desert taught me." In one small town, he helped rebuild a barn after a storm. In another, he saved a lost child from the hills. He asked for nothing in return. Each time he helped someone, he touched the necklace and remembered the 3 women who had saved him. Months later, stories began to spread about a cowboy who had once risked his life for an Apache woman, and who now rode across the frontier helping strangers in need. People told his story by campfires and in saloons. They called him the Bear Rider, a name that came from the Apache tongue, Shashnantan. Some said he had been protected by spirits. Others said he carried 3 guardian angels who watched over him wherever he went. And though no one knew exactly where he was, people swore they had seen him riding through the desert at sunset, his silhouette glowing against the red sky. Years passed. The frontier began to change. New towns rose, old trails disappeared, and the world moved on. But the story of the cowboy and the 3 Apache women lived on in whispers and songs. Old people told it to children as a lesson in kindness and courage. Once, they would say, a man from a faraway world gave everything to save someone he barely knew. And because of his goodness, the spirits of 3 women stood by his side and brought him back to life. In the Apache tribe, Nita and Aline often sat by the fire on quiet nights, looking up at the stars. "Do you think he still rides?" Aline would ask. Nita would smile softly. "Yes, the wind tells me. He is out there, helping, protecting. That is who he is." And far away, somewhere beyond the hills, Cole would sometimes stop his horse and look at the same stars. He would touch the necklace and smile. "I'm still riding," he'd whisper, as if answering her from miles away. One evening, long after, a traveler came through the Apache camp. He told of a cowboy who had built a small cabin near the edge of the desert, a quiet man who treated everyone with kindness, who kept to himself but always helped those in need. When Nadine heard this, she nodded knowingly. "The bear found his den," she said, And so his story became legend, not of war, or guns or glory, but of kindness, courage, and the bond between people who refuse to see each other as enemies. They said that when the wind blows softly through the canyons at dusk, you can still see three figures walking beside a rider, one young, one brave, and one wise. Together they move through the golden light, forever reminding the desert of what it once witnessed, a man who gave his heart for compassion, and three women who gave him back his life.